Hey, John.
Hey, here we are.
Wait,
We're in the.
wait. You're not in the shed.
I am. I'm in my backyard shed. Uh,
Ah, I've
Seriously.
met. This is your famous yurt.
This is, okay, now yurt is a Soviet word.
Okay.
It means shack. It's a ger. And I want you to think of it
Ah,
as a place where I keep my rice. It's a grain ger. Okay.
okay.
Ger spelled G-E-R. Now yeah,
Now,
I actually have a homemade, physically constructed yurt. I had a lot of help from friends and paid artisans, but yeah, I built this place for my backyard, and it's obviously more of a winter thing. We have,
yeah.
I hope you saw the fireplace. When we came in, we have that big open space in the sky here, which is really this is the theologically correct human dwelling.
Okay.
And I'll explain that in terms of chiastic structure in a minute. But yeah, I couldn't resist. I mean, I have, a ger. I have this circular
But
building.
but
That's
people may be wondering why we are here doing these Lake and Ger readings of J.K. Rowling's work. So
I
maybe
hope
we
I
should
hope she
explain.
changes her metaphor. I hope she changes her metaphor for the lake and yurt reading. Yeah.
So
I'm gonna. I think in the title, I'm gonna put the lake and yurt reading.
yes, I think you should.
Yeah.
So we are here celebrating J.K. Rowling's 60th birthday, known in Japan as the Kanreki. Huge deal over there because she's gone all the way through the Chinese astrological calendar of 12 animals and 5 elements, 60 combinations on her 60th birthday. She's basically at the point in the calendar where she came in, and it's time for her second life. To
What a snake!
celebrate,
What a snake! What a
oh,
snake!
wood snake. What a wood snake. Now, to celebrate, we are doing a lake and shed reading of each of her published works, which we have completed. Please go back and look at those videos if you haven't seen them yet. And we're now looking at reader requests. What else can we look at for the remaining days up to her birthday on the 31st of July? We have covered on a two-parter Golden Threads. Check those out. And today, another reader request was to look at chiastic structure, the master, the acknowledged master of which is Dr. John Granger, who is
I thought you were going to
joining.
say J.K. Rowling because
Well,
I say, I mean, she's the cartographer, and I can read a
yeah,
map. Okay, that's a big difference there, Nick. Uh,
but yeah, so she is a master of the ring structure of the chiasm. She writes tweets in chiastic structure. Her longer tweets are in chiastic structure. Probably her shopping lists are a nightmare to follow because you need to go back to the aisles that you started with because she's written it in a ring structure.
but if you
Um,
only have one moment in the store, you're going to
yeah,
choose the central item on the list.
yes. So if there is a Miss Shepherd out there listening who was her English teacher in Wydene
Lucy.
Comprehensive School, we know that Lucy Shepherd taught structure in writing to J.K. Rowling. Um, her most famous within the fandom, largely thanks to John, structural device is the chiastic structure, is the ring reading, the ring writing. We would love to chat to her about where J.K. Rowling has got this from. What was it taught to her by Lucy Shepherd? Oh, that would be a great interview. She's given a couple of interviews to podcasts, not on Harry Potter, and she seems a lovely, funny, engaging person. I'd love to chat to her on this.
Rowling says that she was pretty much a role model to her of an intelligent woman. Um, yeah, the Holy Grail, and she might tell us that A list. That's what we're looking for. Um, anyway, the lake thing doesn't have to be a person inside, Hogsmeade Comprehensive School. It can be the books that she's read. And certainly the only remember, nobody was outside of Brett Kendall and Joyce Adele, who were talking about the relationship between the books in the series and talking about it as Brett was a postgraduate student at Fordham University in Old Testament studies. And so he said everything I was reading was chiastic structure. And so, of course, I was reading Harry Potter intensively. I was seeing chiastic structure. And to our great good fortune, it was because it was there. But he was the only one talking about it. And unless you were really into, Merlin Matters and stuff like that, he had an incredibly involved bulletin board type website. You didn't hear about that. I was already acting as the Harry Potter scholar, so I knew him. He's a wonderful man. I was trying to find out. I stumbled across this in 2010. It was 3 years after the Harry Potter stories had come to their conclusion. We were getting the last of the movies, and I was rewriting a book. And what I really wanted to do was find out where Rowling got her literary alchemy. And for that, I was looking to C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, or the Ransom Trilogy. It's called both. Because it's 3 books and it's clearly a black, white, and red piece. And here we already had learned through Michael Ward that the Chronicles of Narnia were written as astrological symbols. And I identified the Space Trilogy as an alchemical 3-stage set with the Negretto and the Albedo and the Ribetto neatly set out in these books. And so I did a deep dive into all the scholarship on the Space Trilogy. And everything that Lewis has written has been examined thoroughly. We found out that it hadn't been done that thoroughly because Michael Ward turned that apple cart over in a revolutionary way with his Planet Narnia book. But, and I was thinking, well, someone must have identified this alchemical stuff because he actually uses words like albedo inside Paralandra. I mean, it's just like, this is like in your face type stuff. But no, it hadn't. But I did find one book by Sanford Schwartz, professor at Penn State University. It's a T.S. Eliot scholar, really. And he wrote a book called Planets in Peril. And in it, he described how these three books, Out of the Silent Planet, Paralandra, and I'm going to forget the last name. Always forget the last one. Anyway, that the 3 books are written as ring compositions. And he drew them as a straight line to show A, B, C, D, E, D, C, B, A, and showed how they were set up that way. Well, that just totally blew my mind. I'd never heard anybody talk about structure in C.S. Lewis along those lines. And he mentioned Mary Douglas and how that was your guide to this. Mary Douglas, author of Fury in Danger, probably the most famous and globally recognized anthropologist of the 20th century. Maybe Clifford Geertz. I mean, there's others, but Mary Douglas, a giant. And she wrote one of her last books was Thinking in Circles, about the universal archetypal story form is the ring composition. Now, that was all brand new to me. I remembered that Brett Kendall had said that the series was a chiastic structure. And so I went back and I filled in the stuff. He hadn't finished that work. And I said, wow, it is. It matches up. You get that turtleback structure, which I'll explain in a second. And then I thought, one of the elements that Douglas identifies is there are rings inside of rings. Is it possible that each book is a ring? And I remember being in my basement in Allentown, Pennsylvania, next to the oil drum. It was a rental place, but it was a place the guy used as his workshop. And in it was the oil for the furnace was right behind me. It was a pretty bizarre space. And not quite as theologically correct as this one. And in it, I just would read each book from the first part and then the last part to see if they matched. They always did. Sometimes they were marked, Al Post again, duh. And then the centerpiece it was easily identified as something that way. And so you had to turn, and then all you had to do was draw the lines across the circles. Now, I'm going to explain that in a second, but imagine my astonishment to find out that Rowling had written, every one of these novels as a ring and the series as a ring. And because of Joyce Adele's work, it's actually even a more involved ring. It's actually a chiastic ring. This was absolutely mind blowing, and I was asked to do a special talk for the group that should not be named. They had a new venue at the Samsung Center in New York City, and they wanted me to do something spectacular with that venue because it had a giant screen behind it. And I said, "Oh, Jonathan was." I said, "Have I got something for you? You're never going to read the books again after you see what I've done here." And Jonathan's very kind, but he was like, "John, you don't need to oversell your talks. We love your talks. We travel to all your things, And really, it was funny because the group that should not be named is like the largest Harry Potter fan group in the world, and they're the funniest and maybe the most intelligent. They all come in cosplay to your talks, and in this one, they all showed up with red bow ties, which is my signature for public talks. So you had people with Quidditch outfits on with a red bow tie, and Cornelius Fudge with a red bow tie. It was really cute. And I gave that talk about the ring thing, and Jonathan came up afterwards and said, "John, you're going to have to publish this. You're going to have to give us these charts. Mind blown." And I said to you, "You're overselling this. Don't oversell it." He says, "I think you undersold. We'll never look at these books the same way again." Now that was really rewarding because I felt kind of stupid. How did I read these books all these years and not notice these parallels? People like Irvin who just discovered the chapter 13 golden thread that went through all the books. Why didn't I say, well, what's the structure of the books? How does this work? Well, I had no idea about ring composition. I knew chiastic structure because I was a classicist, and every line in Virgil and Homer has a chiasm. It has a point where it flips, and you can't scan a line, and that's largely your job as a classicist, is to scan the lines unless you're able to identify that break. But I didn't know about ring writing as such. Hence my debt to Sanford Schwartz, his scholarship about C.S. Lewis, his pointing the way to Mary Douglas. And this caused really kind of a revolution in Potter studies, because this was an entirely new tool that we didn't know was in the shed, and we had to understand its relationship to the other tools. And that's really been the last 15 years, is working this out and how serious she is about it. It's definitely a sign of Potter punditry if people will talk about this. You have to get to a certain level of intensity with your studies to get to this point, especially if you're doing it, if you're reading it without an actual codex, Nick, because a codex is a ring structure. You've got facing pages, Anyway, that let's go to it. Let me give you the actual what a ring. You wanted the firehose version of what a ring composition is. I'm going to go through my books, tell you what's inside each one of my books to get to the book that I wrote on this. And Nick's got this also. Look at that. Okay, there's my first book. It's actually the last edition of the first book. That's largely about the meaning behind the mania for the best-selling books, right? Then that's published by Tyndale. Now out of print. I own all copies of that, and I'm going to rewrite that, under my own thing. Harry Potter's bookshelf, this was from Penguin. That was my survey of, this is how to read at 4 levels. This was my book about how to read the way Rowling actually embeds symbols and how she interprets them inside the books. That's a book about reading as much as it is about English literature. Then there's the books that I wrote just for Harry Potter family. I self-published these. This was an anthology that I edited. Joyce Adele is inside here. And it's Who Killed Albus Dumbledore? I mean, probably the rudest reviews I've received. To this day, I get people will put in saying, I didn't know Dumbledore died. How dare you put this? Anyway, these are our predictions for what was going to happen in Deathly Hallows. Then Deathly Hallows lectures, in which I really brought together all the things that we'd written at Hogwarts Professor, I'd written about it, and talks I'd given at fan conventions at universities about the Deathly Hallows talk. That was, well, it's still the of my self-published books. It's the giant in a way, because it still sells. It's still relevant. It's odd. It's still cutting edge in some ways. You get all the Coleridge stuff, the eyeball symbolisms, that kind of thing. It doesn't have any of the ring structure stuff. And then there's the book that I wrote just before Deathly Hallows came out, called Unlocking Harry Potter: 5 Keys for the Serious Reader. And in it, I laid out the keys, the tools that are in Rowling's shed. We didn't know about the lake in the shed then, but I talked about basically the hidden keys as these tools, that she had these traditional tools, and how you had to use those tools to figure out how she was going to write the next book. And really, my predictions were reasonably off. I did get the withered arm stuff and Snape's potion stuff, but it's a fun book. People buy it today because they want something on alchemy, and the alchemy stuff was really laid out at length. 3 chapters of that book are about the alchemy. But they'll write to me, they'll write reviews saying, "Gosh, this book is so good, but it's never been updated." Well, that's the next piece. Is I have updated that book. There's 7 keys now, and if you in this Kanreki celebration, you're at the Kanreki party, and John's had a little too much to drink. John's looking around saying, "Anybody know a literary agent that can find me a home for this book?" It's that book and my thesis, and it's an essential book. The next thing is that this is the book that I wrote. Was really just the transcript of the talk, expanded transcript of the talk that I gave in New York City in 2010. But it has all the charts in it, has all of the things, and it's the magical structure and transcendent meaning of the Hogwarts saga. It was you can see there's the ring, and you can see all the rings of the titles as they're independent rings. It's like a little bit like Tootsie Rolls, but yeah. Anyway. No, lifesavers. They're like lifesavers. That book continues to sell on Lulu. You have to go to lulu.com to buy it, because I've never published it properly. That's going to be part of Harry Potter Unlocked, or The Lake in the Shed, 7 Keys to J.K. Rowling, however shape that book takes. All that to say, this is the ring composition part of this. I apologize in advance. Again, this is not in any ways a full treatment of this. I'm just going to tell you what it is. I'll give you one, for instance, very briefly. Ring composition is a structure, and it was laid out by Mary Douglas, who I believe, there she is. Okay, Thinking in Circles, an essay on ring composition. This is from Yale University Press. It was a series of lectures that she gave, where she really wanted her swan song, her crowning project, to be archetypal story. What is the universal way human beings tell stories? And it's ring writing. Now, she has 7 points, and if you take my featured class, I'll explain to you the difference between the 4 points that I highlighted and the 7 points that Mary Douglas comes up with. The 4 points are definitely of the 7. The 3, though, I just combined them. So the 4 points of what a ring composition are. First, you got to have a latch. If it's a ring, the beginning and the end have to meet as a story frame. I'm going to start. You see me doing this circle thing. That's because I want you to think of the beginning of the story as the circles beginning at the bottom, and it's moving around and latching up at the end. That those things have to match up in terms of the characters involved, the questions that they raise, the mystery to be solved. All those things that are in the beginning have to be revealed or referred to again at the finish for that latch to close and the ring to be a circle. The next thing is that turn. When you get to the halfway point, that halfway point on that, as you're journeying around from beginning to end, that middle point is going to echo and suggest that opening and finale latch. So that's going to be your mark that we've reached the midpoint of the story. So if it's an A, B, C, D, then D is going to echo both D and A prime, because it's going to go C prime, B prime, A prime, A and A prime on the latch. D is going to echo A and A prime, right? Now the part that gets almost any story, any half-hour comedy on television is going to have a latch and it's going to have a turn, in the drama. But here we get the parallel analogies. What Rowling talks to, I think seriously embeds inside the story as the reverse echo effect. And that is that the second half of the book, that C prime, B prime, A prime, is echoing the front half in reverse order. So if you're going A, B, C, D, you're going to do C, B, A latch. All right. So that if you draw it as a circle, you're going to have the beginning and end latch. You're going to have that turning point at the top, which you can draw a line straight down. So now you've got a bisected circle, top to bottom. And then you're going to draw the lines across of these parallel analogies. And that's why they call this a turtle back structure, because it looks like a turtle. And finally, and this is really Mary Douglas's thing that blows my mind, that really blew my mind at the time, is that there are rings within rings, story mirrors inside the larger story mirror. So when I went back and when I knew that from Kendall's work and Odell's work, that the series had relationship with the books, that was pretty easy, that the series was a ring cycle. That made a lot of sense. And it was something that was invisible because you couldn't really recognize it until you had all 7 books. You couldn't be sure that there was a latch and an axis and that you had all those parallels, or what exactly those parallels were, until you had them all. But then when I read that there were rings inside of rings, that made me snap to this. And also knowing that C.S. Lewis had written each one of his stories as as a ring, as a self-contained ring. And I went back and found the books, and they were all self-contained rings. Rowling has taken this also to a different level. By the time she writes Order of the Phoenix, she's not only writing the books as a ring cycle, but they refer to the other books in the series in important ways. And not only is she writing each book as a ring, but she's embedding rings inside that ring, where there'll be a set of chapters that actually have a complete ring to it. Now, if you read Mary Douglas, and I hope that you will, or you read any of the Old Testament and New Testament scholarship in which chiastic structure is essential, they'll always talk to you about the rings inside the rings, where Genesis is a ring, but the sacrifice of Abraham inside of that is also a perfect ring. And that you begin to look for these structures. And that one signature of the traditional mind is the ability to understand when the ring has begun. Recognizing the story turn in that there's a reference to something which is like the beginning, and therefore that must be the meaning in the middle. And now we're going to hear echoing coming back to show how this worked and how the question is resolved. That's a sign of the strength of the ear of traditional peoples, is that story told that way caused them to have that relationship to the center. As Ralph Johnson, is the Virgil scholar maybe of the 20th century, which is really saying something, said in a class, he says, the modern mind has no ear, and consequently the modern mind is mush. that if you can't hear these things, not only the chiastic structure of each line of Virgil, but understanding how Virgil works front and back, you don't really understand Virgil. Now, if there's one line for a ring composition, it is introverted parallelisms in a ring with an axis. Okay, the introverted parallelisms are those lines across the circle in a ring with a bisecting axis line. Okay, if you want to say that you learned something today, you can tell people that you have introverted parallelisms in a ring with an axis is what a ring composition is. All right, I promise that here's a picture of what a ring composition looks like. Now, a ring composition, this is a generic ring composition that so here is a generic ring structure, and I've tried to color code it so this is almost John-proof, you know. I'm wearing marine colors here. That was always the thing when you gave talks. Your staff NCOIC would say, "You better make this marine proof. You better make this so that they can't possibly misunderstand this." And as they were talking to me, they were like, "Make it so that you can understand it." So I usually just say John proof. Now this John proof illustration is, you can see the latch, the beginning and the end, the same color there. There's your A, and then you go up and you see the center there. The story turn is a reflection of that, and that line draws through the center of it. And now we'll draw in the B and the C and the D's, you know, right? So you can see how those lines come across to give us that turtleback structure. And that's going to be echoes in dialogue, echoes in characters, echoes in plot points, answers to questions. Those are going to be the things we're looking for. And they can also be reverse, you know, so that it can be the opposite of what happened on the opposite side. So you're going to see the thing turned upside down sometimes. All right, so let's get through the first example of this, Nick. Let's go to Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Now, if you look at this, what's astonishing is it's near perfection in that, you know, well, I should actually just, I'm just going to read this if I can find it. Okay. I'm gonna go to the next slide, Nick, which I think is just 5. I'm not going to do every one of these chapter correspondences. Okay, in the first chapters, I'm going to go with the Hagrid chapters as the first correspondence, and that's, you know, Hagrid appears as the keeper of the keys and Diagon Alley, chapters 4 and 5. And then we get the corresponding chapters across the center, which are chapters 15 and 14, the Forbidden Forest and Norbert, the Norwegian Ridgeback, and Nicholas Flamel. You know, in these chapters, which are the Hagrid correspondent lines, Harry meets Hagrid in the House on the Rock, and he learns his wizard identity before he travels in the Diagon Alley world, hidden behind the leaky cauldron. In the second half, Harry travels with Hagrid into the dark world of the Forbidden Forest. He protects his protector by shipping off Norbert, and he learns the identity of the mysterious stone's owner. I mean, we have the parallel with, you know, Hagrid, you know, going into the Gringotts, you know, the parallel in Deathly Hallows is he goes back in there again. You know, that's the whole cycle. But here we have, inside this book, they have the Hagrid chapters. Then we have chapters 3 and chapter 16. And that's the travel adventure. On the front half, we had the letters from no one. The Dursleys flee magical danger across the UK as Uncle Vernon fears for his life. In the second half, through the trapdoor, Harry, with Ron and Hermione, his friends, pursue real danger under Hogwarts with little thought for their lives. All right, and that's an inversion, because Harry's being dragged around the UK, but Harry's the driving force of the second one. That's its transformation. They reflected in its mirror image. Then we have Ron and Harry with their identity issues. In chapter 6, the journey from platform 9 3/4, Ron and Harry meet and share their complementary and opposite fears on the Hogwarts Express. And at Christmas time, okay, in the Mirror of Erised chapter, they share their as different dreams in front of the Mirror of Erised. Harry, without a family, longs to be with them. Ron, from a large family, wants to start apart. But those chapters on opposite sides of the book are mirror reflections with a mirror tossed in. Right? Speaking of which, I need to go over to the other side of the gear here for a second. I need to get my my ring glasses on here, Nick. I need to get my circular glasses on here. And again, of course, with our ring and the radiant center, these are the only glasses you can really read with here. All right. Then there's Harry learns who he is in the Sorting Hat, and in chapter 11, the Quidditch, that's 7 and 11. Harry passes 2 tests. He passes the Sorting Hat and a confrontation with a flying Draco to capture a round object. A lot of round objects and rings and circles and spheres inside here. To qualify for 2 teams that are fundamental to his identity, namely Gryffindor House and Seeker on the Quidditch team. Both tests are administered by Professor McGonagall, of course, and feature Slytherin echoes. If not for Draco cueing in to the nastiness of Slytherin or egging him in the flying class, how different his life would have been, right? So 7-11, we get Harry as the Seeker and as Gryffindor hero. Wow. Again, Harry learns who he is. That's a nice parallel. And then there's the reverse echo at the turn. And just before chapter 9, which is the actual turn, we get the Potions Master and Halloween. Just before the central chapter, Harry meets his worst male adult enemy at Hogwarts. Just after the break, he makes his best girl student friend. You know, of course, those not enamored with Alan Rickman would say the echo here with no reverse is Snape and the Mountain Troll as reflected images, but really it's defining moments of Harry's key relationships. Now, Nick, I haven't included. Yes, I have. Here it is. I haven't to do a cut and correct here. All right. So the beginning and the end of the story. Now, we've done the parallels. Let's talk about the beginning and the end, which are chapters 1 and 2, The Boy Who Lived in the Vanishing Glass, and chapter 17, The Man with Two Faces. And this is really the defining point of the book, which is miraculous survival. Harry survives meeting the Dark Lord as a baby at the book's beginning, and again in the finale as an 11-year-old. He has parallel experiences too with a glass, right? The King James Version English, glass means mirror. And so when he has the vanishing glass, meaning referring to the snake's glass cage at the zoo, it's also a pointer to the man with two faces, where Harry stands in front of a glass there. There's a serpent character at the zoo's reptile house, and stories end in front of the Mirror of Erised. There's also that, the serpent in front, the front half is trying to get out of the glass, and in a reverse echo, the heir of Slytherin at the close is trying to get into the glass. All right. And it's, forgive me, that's so brilliant, especially if you've explored the perennialist understanding of the symbol of the mirror. Because here we have a mirroring structure and a mirror in it, with glass references in the titles to be like, I mean, Rowling is knocking, saying, hello, is anybody out there listening? No, we weren't. But then there's the midpoint between the opening chapters 1 and 2 and the end chapter 17 is chapter 9, the Midnight Duel. Now, first of all, Midnight Duel. If you just laid out the titles, Nick, in a choose the turning point of the book, the Midnight Duel would scream at you, right? Because here you have a duel, which is opposition between two sides, and you have midnight, which is the turning point of the day. And so she marks that pretty heavily. Harry is out and under his invisibility cloak at midnight and survives a face-to-face meeting with Fluffy. The pivot chapter is named for the turning point in every day's accounting of time and for the resolution of contraries that a duel represents. There is no duel in that chapter, okay? Harry survives the Dark Lord, a visit with a snake, a run-in with Fluffy, and in the next chapter with a troll, as well as Quirrell-de-Mort before the Mirror of Erised, which gives the reader miraculous survivor chapters in the beginning, middle, and the end. All right, that's a lot, but that's wow. And I didn't even do the try to find where you are, Nick. There you are. Okay. I didn't even do all of them. I just did, 5 of them. Buy the book and you can get the whole chart. Okay, we're way over time, and I've only done this one example. So I'm just going to roll through the rest of the stuff here, so you could, for future attractions, if you want to take classes that I'll be hosting on all these subjects. First is the language and the wardrobe. If you look at the language and wardrobe structure, what do you see? You see a 17-chapter book with a turn in chapter 9. I mean, this is hat tipping in a phenomenal way. That Rowling is basically saying, my first book, a 7-book series, is for children, is going to tip the hat to the master and having almost the exact same structure. That's a whole nother talk. Then there's the rings within ring. Yeah, we can do the whole series thing, how that works. You can see how all of these things work. First is just the standard ring with the turtleback structure. And then there's the ring. All these special effects, Nick. This is for when I give the talk. And then there's the actual chiastic structure of this, which incorporates Joyce Adele's insights about the relationships of books 1 and 5 and 3 and 7. That's the next slide. And that's with Goblet of Fire in the center. So you see that we go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7. And Goblet of Fire is the centerpiece. The axis runs right through Goblet of Fire. Again, way inside baseball. Get the book to find out about all of that stuff. But are there rings inside of rings? Yes. I was asked by Ibid, the editor of the Phoenix and the Flame book put out by the Rowling Library, to offer my ideas of the structure of Order of the Phoenix in terms of those block charts. And sure enough, the most important single set of chapters inside Order of the Phoenix in terms of its symbolic meaning is the adventure inside the Department of Mysteries in Phoenix, where they go from the circular room, the circular hallway, around through the Hall of Prophecy and come back again, and it's an exact ring. You'll have to pick up the next book here, which is Ibid's The Phoenix and the Flame. It's a wonderful anthology. Outside of one Potter pundit who decided not to contribute because
guilty.
Because he had the correct priorities in his life. But the only thing missing in that book is the lake discussion of what Rowling was about at the time. But that every other Potter pundit of note, I shouldn't say that, but an incredible collection of Potter pundits checking in on the structure of that book. And that was an example of the rings inside of rings. And we see the rings inside of rings again. We've talked about this. We can go off thing now. Go off the stuff is the running grave, where we have each part of the book, except for the last 2 chapters, which really just give us the latch, is a phenomenal set of rings. Every one of the parts is a ring all the way around, not just one ring inside the whole ring, but every part is a ring. And the series itself, as we have it so far, the 7-book thing, gives us the exact replica of the Hogwarts saga ring. Rowling has said that she was OCD as a child. I don't think that really covers it. Among Potter pundits, would like to say that she's CDO, because CDO is OCD alphabetized. I mean, this is and why and how it works. I'm way over time already, but it's the same as this structure here. You have a radiant point that brings you down into the contraries of our life, which is a reflection of God's transcendence and his immanence, his simultaneous being completely other and being closer than your own breath. That's the crossways here of the walls, but it all comes from that radiant point that is God and his unity. The entire world is this representation. That's why the circle is defined by its all those points on the circle are equidistant from the invisible point, but you see that point in its representation in the circle. So in the world, you can see God everywhere if you understand to look for his polarity without duality, to include male and female. You don't ever want to elide male and female other than sexual congress, which gives you life as the resolution of those contraries. That's why her structure works so well with literary alchemy and with her depicted psychology, is because all of those things are about the transformation of soul in spirit, which is the essential human dichotomy, is our individual soul and its relationship with its transcendent aspect within us, our heart. The structure, besides giving you the meaning in the middle, the structure itself is the meaningful representation of what she's trying to present to her readers about story. So it's a great discovery. It's a great tool. I look forward to sharing it with you. Those of you who want to study with me and Nick, we talk about this at length in a class we give. Sorry to have gone over, but really to ask me to give a fire hose, presentation of this in less than a couple hours is rude. Rude.
It was a brave attempt, John. It was a very brave attempt. Thank you very much. Guys, we will.
What's next? What's next, Nick?
That's the question. Have we got any further reader requests, or is there something that you'd like to do, John?
I do want to do something about Rowling's feminism.
Okay.
Because that's a lake and shed thing we can talk about.
Look, John, watching two old men talk about feminism is going to be compulsive viewing.
Well, okay, that's if you're not going to give us suggestions, we're going to do the ugly. We're going to do the but you can all come into my yurt. I stay in here for the rest of our talks next time. This believe me, it's a lot more comfortable than my my garage.
I can imagine so. All right, John, I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.
Good.